Hey, and welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show on the Big 810 AM. The Big 810 AM, I am Ben Shapiro, your humble host. Now joining us on the phone, Congressman Steve King. Steve King is a congressman from the great state of Iowa. He served in the Iowa State Senate for 6 years. He was elected to Congress in 2002, representing Iowa's 5th Congressional District. He actually works on the Agriculture Committee, and I'm having on Congressman King today to discuss a couple of issues. But first and foremost, welcome to the program, Congressman King.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ben. I appreciate being back with you.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. There was a big scandal that broke this week about the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, with regard to a woman named Shirley Sherrod. I've been discussing it on the program. And Ms. Sherrod made some comments in a speech in which she talked about basically discriminating against a white farmer. She's also taken part in what's called the Pigford Farm settlement. I've made the contention on this program that she is in fact a racist and did deserve to get fired. I'm not going to ask you whether she deserved to get fired, but I am going to ask you to flesh out a little bit what exactly was the Pigford Farm settlement, and why is it such a bad thing for the country at large?
Well, the Pigford Farm settlement, that started back in around in 1995, at the mid-'90s. Dan Glickman was Secretary of Agriculture under Bill Clinton. There were some allegations made that the USDA had discriminated against black farmers and had declined to or refused to provide them the same kind of programs that they may have provided had they been white. And so the allegations of discrimination, we know them. They come up pretty regularly. We saw them out of this Capitol building when the Congressional Black Caucus walked through the Tea Party people. Always allegations, and often there's not much substance underneath that. And in this case, Dan Glickman stood up and told the world that the USDA had, in fact, as according to his opinion, discriminated against black farmers. That turned into a class action suit, of which there was a negotiated settlement, and that negotiated settlement included allowing black farmers or those who wanted to be black farmers to file claims. There was a statute of limitations on that consent decree, would be the right way to describe that, and around $1 billion was spent and distributed to help compensate for the allegations of discrimination. And I have sat with the individual who administered and dealt with most of that, and talked to these black farmers, and also I had people from Iowa, from my district, whom I know, who kept files on this, that were deployed down into the southern part of the United States to help settle this consent decree. And they came back in the highest percentage of, let's say that the lowest percentage of the claims that they claimed were fraud, but they had to settle anyway, was 75%.
Wow.
Some allege that 99% of this is fraud. We know that there were attorneys advocating within the black churches, especially in the South, telling people, this is your 40 acres and a mule, you'll be compensated for the sins of the fathers of the people that are paying the taxes today. In other words, compensated by the descendants of slave owners and everybody else for that matter. And so here's what this came out to be was, and it brought to my attention, because on the Judiciary Committee there was a bill brought forward by Bobby Scott, African-American Democrat from Virginia, who wanted to and did effectively extend the statute of limitations for the Pigford Farms case, and in doing so, it opened it up again. Now, they first were talking about maybe 1,000 to 2,000 claims, and the number of claims went over 20,000, and even the president of the black farmers testified that there were only 18,000 black farmers in all of America. So what we're doing is paying every black farmer in America out of the borrowed U.S. Treasury because of something that one might consider to be, I guess, white guilt. But the Pigford Farms, is all but a few of them were discriminated against. I grant that. I think they were all compensated. Those that were discriminated against, the rest is fraud, Ben.
Exactly. Well, look, Shirley and Charles Sherrod. Shirley Sherrod obviously fired by the USDA this week, the Obama administration coming out and basically apologizing for not having gone through the proper process. Shirley Sherrod was part of the Pigford Farm settlement. She ran a group called New Communities, Inc., and that group, which was basically a large black commune, it didn't run a profit. It didn't get loans because it didn't run a profit. It wasn't a profitable enterprise. And they received, under the Pigford Farm settlement, $13 million. She personally received $150,000. Her husband also received $150,000 for quote-unquote pain and suffering. There was also an unspecified amount paid to them in forgiveness of debt. It's actually the largest award so far in Pigford versus Vilsack. It's actually the largest award that's been granted to her. What does that say about her being appointed to USDA in the first place?
Oh boy, some of these things that you told me are news to me today, Ben. I mean, said the basics and the rudiments I had, but as you lay that out, I don't know where to put that. Appointed to the USDA under this administration, and having been the largest recipient of the Pigford Farm settlement, I'll tell you what that makes me think. We've watched what's happened within the Justice Department and the built-in bias that's there that was testified to under oath by Christian Adams, who had to resign his position as a Department of Justice attorney in order to comply with a lawful subpoena where he was subpoenaed to testify before the Civil Rights Commission. He did, and he testified that there's a racial bias built within the Department of Justice. It looks to me like their USDA was out recruiting people that might have that built into them when they arrived at the job.
Unbelievable. Well, and all this really goes to is how racially motivated this administration remains, because reopening this case, it just seems to me it's just more evidence of what we already knew about this administration, which is that this is an administration that thinks racially. This is an administration that appoints its officials racially, from Van Jones to Shirley Sherrod, and then they complain whenever they're called out about it.
Well, that's right. And if this was going to be the first post-racial president, this is a president who trades in race issues, and there could be two motives for that. One would be the more obvious one. The other one would be that I think that he has all of his political life been the beneficiary of playing race politics. And that's why I call it a default mechanism that's built within the Obama administration, breaks down on the side of favoring the minority because they've been rewarded politically for doing that. They're building coalitions of victims groups. It's really anathema to the American dream. We're about equal rights, equal opportunity, equal blessings that come from God, not about special rights, nor are we about victimhood, nor should we be identifying ourselves as a part of a victims group. That subdivides, it breaks down the values that make America great. And the people on the other side of the aisle have been rewarded for it. This is something I want to look into pretty deeply, being the largest recipient of the Pigford Farms case to the tune of $13 million plus, it sounds like, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is something we should do an investigation of if Republicans get a hold of the gavels after November.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no reason that somebody who's the largest recipient of a government discrimination suit should all of a sudden be basically one of the officials in that department. It certainly seems a little bit odd. I mean, I think an investigation is clearly called for.